Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to give a voice to Minnesotans to relay their thoughts on how Congress should resolve this impasse and raise the debt ceiling to avoid a default. On Wednesday, I received an email from a constituent in St. Louis Park, my hometown. His email reads, "Dear Senator, I am a Republican. I am a Minnesotan. I'm a small business owner. I am considered to have a high income relative to the average American. Here's my request. Please work together to get this debt limit impasse settled." On Thursday, I received this email from a man in Bloomington. He writes, "I'm a small businessman in the middle of a fundraising effort. The concern over the debt ceiling has caused all the angel investors to put off any discussion of investment until they know what is going to happen. This has stopped my ability to raise funds, which will lead to two new high-quality jobs in Minnesota. I support a simple bill that increases the debt limit to get us through the 2012 elections, as has been done hundreds of times before." Yesterday, I received an email from a couple in Bemidji. Quote, "We are retired small business owners who are watching our very, very conservative retirement account drop and plunge due to the inability of Congress to come up with a plan for the debt ceiling. We trust your judgment as a senator, but plead with Congress and the Senate to come up with a solution. We absolutely cannot afford to see our retirement savings sink again like they did in 2008. And it's not just individual citizens. I received a letter from Dakota County's administrator. The letter reads in part, "If the federal government does not resolve its fiscal issues in a timely and responsible manner, it will drive up costs to taxpayers here in Dakota County. Being able to borrow at the lowest possible rates has meant that our county's taxpayers have gotten more and better public facilities, from libraries to senior housing to highway interchanges, and saved hundreds of thousands of dollars for both property taxpayers and senior housing residents in the past several years alone." The city of Chaska reached out to my office explaining that they are planning to sell debt in August to fund a street reconstruction program and refund their water treatment plant. If Congress fails to act, these projects will come at a much higher cost to residents of Chaska. I received a particularly compelling email yesterday from a woman from Falcon Heights. She wrote, "I'm writing again to say I support the president and realize a need to compromise. It is scary for a 66-year-old retired school teacher who has Medicare and Social Security. Scarier is a default and what it would do to the economy." That's advice from Sue. Sue gets it. She gets that Congress's failure to act may have a direct impact on her, but the impact is really for the whole economy. And Sue is asking for us to compromise. And compromise we have. Let me make one thing clear. Leader Reid's plan is a compromise. Let me make another thing clear. House Speaker Boehner's plan is a Tea Party plan. Harry Reid's plan is a true compromise. It contains all spending cuts and zero revenues. During these debates, there have been lots of ratios floating around. Senator Conrad, the budget chairman, proposed a balanced and sensible plan that had a 1-to-1 spending cut to revenue ratio. Personally, I like that approach. President Obama was negotiating a 4-to-1 or even 5-to-1 spending cut to revenue ratio. In the Reid plan, there's no ratio. It's 100% cuts and zero revenue. Secondly, it contains dollar-for-dollar spending cuts to match the debt ceiling increase. This is exactly what the Republicans have been asking for. Yet, this morning, I learned that 43 of my Republican colleagues have signed a letter to Leader Reid signaling their opposition to his proposal. Why? Well, they say that the savings from winding down the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan don't count. Specifically, they say that these savings are, quote, a widely ridiculed accounting gimmick that breeds cynicism, unquote. Yet all but 3 of the 43 senators who signed this letter voted for the Ryan budget on May 25th this year. That budget counted the same drawdowns as almost identical in savings. So those savings were legitimate enough to secure their support for the Ryan budget, but not legitimate enough to secure their support for Leader Reid's debt ceiling compromise. And here we are, on the precipice, and suddenly they've done a 180-degree turn. Either these savings count or they don't. You can't have it both ways. So we are proposing exactly what Republicans have been saying that they want. Yet instead of accepting this deal, they are using what precious time we have left to push forward with their agenda. And it's not even their agenda. It's the Tea Party agenda. Their radical agenda is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Last night we voted down Speaker Boehner's plan, which requires the passage of a balanced budget constitutional amendment. A balanced budget amendment sounds, on its face, sensible. But in reality, all of the current House proposals for a balanced budget amendment would have disastrous consequences for our nation. A balanced budget constitutional amendment would do permanent damage to our social safety net by slashing spending to 18% of GDP. That's what they all propose. We haven't had a spending ratio that low since 1966. And today's America is very different than 1966. We have a much older population. Today we have a higher percentage of people drawing on Social Security and Medicare benefits, more than ever before. Healthcare costs are 50% higher. Even during President Reagan's tenure, spending averaged 21% of GDP. What would an 18% cap really mean? Well, let's use the Republican Study Committee's budget proposed in April as an example. A budget like theirs is roughly what we would expect if we capped spending at 18% of GDP. Their budget cut non-defense discretionary funding by 70% by 2021. Like the Ryan plan, the Republican Study Committee's budget ended Medicare as we know it, changed it into a voucher program, and raised eligibility to 67, but it did it more quickly. Their budget raised the Social Security retirement age to 70. It resulted in important programs like food stamps and Medicaid getting cut by 50%. The Republican Study Committee budget was the Ryan budget on steroids. And I'd like to remind you of what happened to it on the House floor. This is an interesting story, because this story shows you just how extreme this budget was. Most House Republicans didn't actually want such a harmful, draconian budget to be the official House budget. But many of them wanted to go on record to brag to their Tea Party supporters that they had voted to slash $9 trillion in federal spending. So they scheduled a vote and just assumed that Democrats would vote it down for them, and then they could just blame the Democrats. Well, the minority whip, Steny Hoyer, caught wind of their plan and had an idea. So moments before the vote, he asked Democrats to vote present. This would leave the onus squarely on the Republicans to vote it up or down. Chaos erupted in the House as Republican leadership realized what was happening. Too many votes had been cast in favor of the radical budget, and it was on the verge of actually passing. Frantically, Republican leadership got a number of their members to switch from yes to no, and in the end, 119 Republicans voted in favor and 120 against. Crisis averted. That's how bad this plan was. and a balanced budget amendment that capped spending at 18% would essentially do exactly the same thing. This is a perfect example of political posturing. We voted down Speaker Boehner's plan last night for that very reason. His plan wasn't about finding a real solution. It was all about political posturing. If it became law, it would subject Americans to a very scary Republican Study Committee reality. House Republicans have shown that they don't really want that. The American people definitely don't want that. The American people have clearly said that they want compromise. They want an honest effort to meet in the middle. Sue from Falcon Heights is one of them. Leader Reid has responded to the pleas of the American people by offering us a sensible compromise. I urge my colleagues to be statesmen for the sake of the country. Please come to the table. We are trying to work with you for the sake of the country. The clock is ticking. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.